For this quick little exercise, I've already started a few perspectives. I'm going to draw the third one, but really what we're going to talk about is the use of tone to develop contrast so that the perspective reads. I'm going to talk directly about like toning and hatching as versus the idea of rendering material or texture. So we're adding hatch or tone for contrast. So what I've done is kind of sketched out the same perspective. I'm going to draw one more here so you just see kind of what I walked through. I had two vanishing points. I started with a vertical, the measuring vertical, my strong vertical that I'm starting with here. I did about 1/3 down, 2/3 up, whatever that was. I roughed out very lightly what a volume would be. I then picked a depth that I wanted it to go back. I then picked a depth that I wanted it to go back this direction. I found the midpoint on that surface. There's the midpoint. I wanted that line. I then also found what was the midpoint on this, which is about there. Okay. And now what that allowed me to do was then kind of construct some of these volumes. So I got this one coming here. I also extended a floor out, so I took this line and extended it out for a ways. I gave it a depth and extended it out a ways. I then, so we could say that that's where that started. See where the logic of the perspective just starts to finish stuff off, right? This is converging back. I want to find the bottom of this. That's going back. I can find the back edge of this. There we go. And that corner is where that would be. I can come with that. That should be there. That should converge there. And my vertical, building all that. Now I also had a roof extension over here. That midpoint I was extending out. Ooh, that wasn't very good. And it was going up. I extended this one out a little farther than I did the other one. No, oop, that's not good. Okay. There we go. All right, so that's kind of how I worked out this little box. Started with the box, took some away, extended something out, extended something else out. Did that 3 times. Now, what we're going to talk about is how might we use a quick bit of toning to have this read a little better. So the first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to always use, in this case, vertical lines for toning. I tend to, when I'm doing toning, I tend to use the same logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm always going to do lines that are vertical in the perspective plane. So let's say I want to tone all of the surfaces that are facing out this direction. So I'm going to I'm just adding little hatch lines here. I'm adding hatch lines here, and I'm still going to do the same kind of idea as what I did before, right? A few more lines back, farther back, so that we get a little bit of that perspective happening in there. One way to do it is just kind of do even hatch the whole way, and then come back in and just give a little more quick. Maybe a few more. Okay, now there's this surface in here. Okay, now that helps that read a little bit, right? We're starting to get these kind of forms popping out. But now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to do the ground plane, and so that's the surface this way. I'm going to stay kind of horizontal with this, and we're going to see what happens with this ground. Okay, so again, if I want to make that perspective read a little more, I might come back in and pop some of those, keeping it even. Okay, so now what we've done with this, we actually, by doing that, all of a sudden this bottom, what we've done is created a lot of contrast around this surface and that surface. So it's made this very important, right? Where previously it was all kind of equal, we were just understanding volume. Now all of a sudden this white plane becomes very dominant conceptually. The rendering starts to really look at that, right? So watch, let me do the same thing where I might use the same tones again. Actually, we'll try this one. I'm going to do a diagonal hatch, but I'm going to do the same diagonal hatch on all of that same surface, just so we see. So now here I'm just going to go diagonal hatch. And I find it really important to keep the same angle. The idea is that you're letting the viewer's eye let go of the pattern itself, but just appreciate it as the tone for that surface. Right? Okay, so now all of a sudden, again, that's reading as this volume and all of that, but now I'm going to do something a little different here. So I'm going to do this. Where's that horizon line? The horizon line starts right there, remember, so I'm actually got to do it there, up. I don't like that gap. Alright, not the cleanest, but now all of a sudden, unlike this one that was definitely about this lower element, this one, now all of a sudden, watch when I pop this, actually we could give it just a little more tone. I'm just going to add a little more tone to that. All right, now all of a sudden, this plane becomes the most important thing, right? Just by changing what we're toning. Like we're still getting the horizon line just as well. Still getting the horizon line, but one of them, that way, that one. So now, for this last one, I think, let's see. Might change. Running them in the perspective. So the horizontal works, I mean the doing the diagonal the whole way works a little bit. I'm going to run now, instead of doing vertical, I'm going to run them in the perspective. Okay, so now all of a sudden I'm going to tone those same ones, but run them. Okay. That helps a little bit, but it's amazing how much all of a sudden this one starts to really look like material, like we think it's boards or something going off in the background. Not sure. I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one and say I want to pretend like there's some tree line in the background. So I'm going to go like this. I tend to just, if I want it to be natural, I tend to not. Over control. Looks like flames. Not the best trees. Now, what we can also do is come in and do the same, let's say, sky or ground plane, but play off the tree line. So what happens if we come in and let's say, I do something different. I'm going to use a vertical edge and just so I tend to draw, I mean I've been doing this all by hand just so you practice, but I also tend to, when I'm doing hatches, I'm usually working with I use my driver's license, student ID. I'm always kind of using a little straight edge to make the hatch read as perfect as possible. That way it stands out as something different than the drawing is just a tone. That's just a graphic style that I like. It also lets me do things like line up those lines when the hatch is going through multiple things. So what I'm doing here is, in this one, I'm blowing past the horizon line for what I'm toning. I'm toning all the way to, let's say, the vegetation line in the background, or maybe a building line in the background. But a different way of seeing it. Now, this is what I want to get is as interesting as it gets. It's all of a sudden gets a little hard to understand where the line is. It seems like it's an object floating in space almost, right? It's much harder to understand without, even though that line's there, we kind of lost some relationship. Now watch what happens when I'll come back in and just add a tone difference between the horizon. That's right. We start to get that idea of the horizon reading through a little bit better, and it starts to kind of give us some background for that. Now, what I want to look at with these is this idea of when you're laying out your drawing, compositionally, we've just used contrast to lace different things, but how we would actually frame this drawing when we're laying it out on a piece of paper, when we're like sketching in our sketchbook, all of a sudden by framing this one, look, I'm getting us to really, the fact that this plane is the highlighted part with the most contrast, meaning the darkest dark, the lightest light is kind of there. It really gets us to focus off over here. So this object is making us look there. I framed it on the page to look there, right? I might have laid it out in my sketchbook because I want the whole idea of this building looking off in this direction. Whereas with this one, I might have framed it differently on the page so that it was all about this roof. Watch what happens when I'm going to come in. It's always about getting profile lines, right? That's what happens when oh, that was a terrible line. I'm going to pop this building out a little bit more. Those two hatches weren't different enough to really read. There we go. There we go. All right, so that idea that all of a sudden now, that same building in the same perspective is now really focused way over here because of how I framed it in the drawing, right? All of a sudden, this is totally about this over here, where this one, the same drawing, is now, because of the tone and because of how it's laid out, possibly laid out on the paper, is all about this, right? What's interesting is this one down here, I might take it and I can make it all about the sky going up here, because we're just getting that horizon line down here. It's not about it looking out, it's more about how maybe it's relating to the sky above. So how we lay it out on the page has a lot to do with how somebody understands what the intent is. All of you need to work on that. So far, all the sketches I've seen, you're filling the entire page with your drawing as if you took a picture and you're drawing every single thing the same value. Okay? Learning how to sketch to communicate something that's important to you is about understanding what to draw and what not to draw. How to leave all that white space to let us understand what's important. Okay? So, is it off over here that's important? Well, how do I highlight those things? Is it off over here that's important? How do I highlight those things? Is it about this ground to sky? How do I make that have more drama? Okay? Right.